All right, so again, if you need to see the intro part of this, so when I talk about the difference between vector and raster images, might be able to find an old video from a previous session. But let's start by talking about the first assignment for CGD 180. So here I should have an example. Let's see if I saved it. Um, Tools panel should be this. There we go. This is an example of what I want you guys to create for your first assignment. So I want you to label all the tools in the tools panel, make it look nice, add some graphics, add your name, give it a nice label. But this is going to be the end result. But before we do that, I'll go through each of these tools. Not every single one, but at least the more often used ones. All right. So the first tool we'll look at is the selection tool. That's the tool that you can use to select an object and move it around. All right, so selection tool, that's your basic selection tool for selecting something. If you hold the Alt button when you're moving something, you can make a copy of it. So useful shortcut. So other useful shortcuts you should know, you have the Alt or Option on the Mac. You have your Shift key and your Control key that usually does something, or Command on a Mac. Sometimes it's not the same exact combination of keys. It might be different on a Mac. Something that's Option on a Mac might be Command. Alt on Windows might be Command on the Mac. I'm not exactly sure, but I know for sure if you hold the Option button or Alt button and you move something, you'll make a copy of it. So good to know. And this is true not just in Illustrator, but other software as well. Not, I know at least in Adobe software like Photoshop and InDesign, it will do that, right? So it's also used for entering a group if you double click with the selection tool. Say you have a group of objects, like these three are grouped together. I can right click and group them. When you group objects together, you can move them together with the selection tool. Right. Let me get a quick snapshot. Real quick, I know one of you knows what was the shortcut for taking a screenshot on the Windows. On the Mac, it's weird that I know the Mac shortcut because I use Windows, but on the Mac it's Command Shift 4. On Windows, it's Windows Shift S. Oh yes, I remembered. Windows Shift S brings up the little screenshot tool. Let's take a screenshot of that and paste it right there. Selection tool, there it is. So if you have a group of objects, you can select the group with the selection tool. You can also copy a group. If you double click on a group, you enter the group. So now I'm inside the group. You'll notice when you're inside a group, what's the difference? This is outside the group. It just says Untitled 4 here, my document name. I haven't saved it, so it says Untitled. If I double click on this, I get this little gray bar down here. And right here it says Layer 1, and right here it says Group. So this tells me that I'm currently in an isolated group. Also, you'll notice everything else is grayed out when I'm inside this group. So I'm in this group of three dots. Everything else is untouchable right now. It's disabled, grayed out. So it's really useful to go inside this group mode. You'll be doing this a lot, especially when you have a lot of stuff on your screen and you're trying to work with something specifically and ignore the other objects. You're going to want to enter the group. So you can enter a group by double clicking on the group. Um, if you double click again on an object, you'll isolate that even more. Now I'm in this specific object, so everything else is grayed out. You want to get out of there, you double click an empty area, and you're back to normal. Right, so double click to enter a group, double click again to go into isolation mode for a single object. You can also get out of here by clicking this to go back to the group, and then click layer 1 to go back to layer 1. So everything is on layer 1, so I can still touch all of these. If I had other objects on other layers, right now I just have this layer 1, but if I had more layers, they would be isolated. And then this is just back to normal. Okay, so isolation mode is good to know. What else can you do with the selection tool? You can scale objects also with this. So here's where shift comes in. You hold shift, you constrain proportions. Proportions, rotations, and movement in 45 degrees. Let's say 245 degrees. Right. So if you hold shift while you're using the selection tool to scale something. So we have these circles. Right, let me make another circle. It's a perfect circle. First of all, drawing a circle, hold shift to constrain the proportions, meaning keep it a perfect circle. Or if I draw like a star, let's say, right? It's a star. If I resize it, I might do this and stretch it and stuff, which looks ugly, right? If you don't want that to happen, hold shift. When you're drawing the star, though, you don't really need to worry about it. It'll just rotate. If you hold shift, it'll stay straight. So that's where, keeping it at a certain angle comes in. Once you let go and you've drawn it and you're rotating it, if you hold shift, you stick to 45-degree angles. Might be easier to tell on a square. And if I rotate this, I can rotate it freely, but if I hold shift, notice it's sticking to 45-degree angles. This is really useful. So shift lets you do that. Also, if I want to move in a 45 degrees direction, like straight, or in this direction 45 degrees, or that direction, or this direction, or this direction. See, I'm holding shift and it's moving in a straight line in one of these 45-degree directions. If I let go of shift, it's more smooth. Put it wherever you want. But trying to move something straight in some direction, constrain to 45 degrees, hold shift. Right? For control, command, nothing really comes to mind. I don't know what you would use that for, but sometimes it's useful. Okay, not for that. What I'm doing here, by the way, this is like a um, this is one of those few features that was added after some like older versions of Illustrator, like CS6 from like 10 years ago. One of the new features that I find pretty useful is being able to smooth your corners, because before there was no way to do this, so you had to like come up with creative ways of doing that, like making a circle of whatever size you need to smooth that corner, and then sticking it to the corner, and then like cutting it off somehow. Like that was like the only way to do it, which is tedious. And I don't think you can even do that with, say, like a star shape. Right? Star shape, you could do this. By the way, you can't. Actually, you can. You could do this with the selection tool on the star. So I don't know why the rectangle you could do this, but on the star you can't with the selection tool. You have to actually be using the direct selection tool, which is the next tool we're gonna look at. But you can do that with the star as well, and that would be really hard to do without this feature, right? So you gotta find a little circle in the corner and drag it. Um, Again, Alt and Shift might come in handy here. If you want to just do this corner, you, well, never mind. You don't need to hold Shift. Just click it twice, just to select that corner only. Because if you just click and drag, you'll do all four corners, but click one extra time on it, you'll do that corner by itself. Um, Shift would be useful if you need to do this, and then Shift select this one to do just those two, not the bottom two. Yeah, so again, Shift to select more than one object at the same time, or to select more than one of these little circles here to manipulate a corner at the same time. Okay. So those are your shortcuts, and um, that's most of the stuff you can do with the selection tool. So the next tool is the direct selection tool. So the direct selection tool is used for selecting directly um, pieces of a component, pieces of a group, or pieces of an object. So if you have a group, say these are grouped together, uh, normally if you're using the selection tool, you have to double click to enter the group and then manipulate these in isolation mode. But if you use the direct selection tool, you don't have to go into isolation mode. The other thing direct selection tool is useful for, or more often used for, is selecting points on a shape to move them individually. And so you can manipulate points with that. You can also use it to smooth corners. We grab those little circles for manipulating the corners. But yeah, so it's for directly selecting objects in a group or parts of an object, like the corners, the points, and the handles if we had any. We Let's see, here we have some handles. So these are handles. You have to select the point to see the handle. These control the curves. So the longer I make this, the more this curve will grow in that direction. And then this one also controls that curve, but from this side, right? If I eliminate these, and we just get a sharp corner there. Um, Next tool, magic wand. Alright, so the magic wand lets you select similar objects based on whatever you choose. So you could select objects based on their fill color or their stroke color. Or a combination of fill and stroke color. Let's say this one's a green square. Let's do this. Okay, let me select. Make 4 of these. But this and this will be black fill, but this one will have a yellow stroke instead of red. Or let's do orange so we can see it better. This one will have, let's say, green. Let's see which green goes good with that red. Alright, and then this one will make it yellow. Also, let's make this a different stroke color. Alright, so we have 2 objects with the same fill, we have 2 with the same stroke, and then we have we have one that's just unique, completely doesn't have the same stroke color or fill color, right? But let's duplicate this. Oh, also, we could also choose based on the thickness as well. So let's say this one has, let's do this. Move this here. These will be thinner. This will be a little bit thicker. The shape doesn't matter. You can't really choose based on shape. So it's either the fill color, the stroke thickness. I think there's a few other things you can choose based on, like the opacity. But anyways, so here's where the magic wand could be useful. If I grab the magic wand, where is it? There it is. If I click, right now I don't know what the default setting is on. It's probably set to fill color. So if I select this, you'll notice all of these got selected. So why did they all get selected? What do they have in common? The fill color. But if you double click on the magic wand, you can, instead of fill color, could uncheck that and choose stroke color and then close it again. Also has a tolerance. So tolerance just means how close does it have to be to that specific stroke color or fill color if that's what you have selected. Right, so right now I have the stroke color. If I click on this, what got selected? All of these with the red stroke. If I choose stroke weight, what gets selected? All of these with the same thickness. Then there's also opacity and blending mode, but I'll probably have it on fill most of the time, or fill and stroke. If I want to just select whatever has the same exact fill and stroke color. And then again, stroke weight. If I do stroke weight, stroke color, and fill color, there's only one. So with these settings, there's only one unique object here. If I had 2 of them with the same everything, then they would both get selected. So whatever, that's the magic wand. In Photoshop, you know the magic wand is just kind of similar. This isn't a Photoshop class, but you should all know Photoshop if you're a graphic designer. So might as well remind you here or throw it in there in case you don't know. Um, this one will select based on the color of the individual pixel, right? This also has tolerance setting, right? The higher the tolerance, the more it's gonna select. But you don't have fills and strokes and thicknesses that you can choose to select with the magic wand like you do in Illustrator. So it's a little bit different. Alright, that's the magic wand. Let's look at the lasso tool. I should start skipping some of these. I don't know if the lasso tool is necessary to cover, but I guess why not? It's probably commonly used, but the lasso tool is for lassoing pieces, what you want to select. So maybe I want to select this corner and this corner, or maybe this whole box here and just this corner and this corner. Well, I could do that with the direct selection tool like I just did, but I could also use the lasso tool to lasso around all those areas. And now whatever I lassoed around is selected. Um, so it's just to select stuff just by drawing a circle around it. Maybe might be more useful if say we had some grass. Should I use the grass brush? Do we have a grass brush? Let's look at our brushes. Artistic, arrows, decorative, maybe in the floral brush set. No? Could have swore there was a grass brush. Maybe I'm mixing it up with the grass symbol. I know there's a grass symbol. There we go. I was probably thinking about the grass symbol. Symbols are just pre-made graphics that are just included. You could create your own symbols, keep them in your symbol library. But I was just trying to find like somewhere where lasso might be useful, because trying to select these points individually might be annoying. Actually, we can't even do that right now. I need to first expand this or break the link so it's not a symbol anymore, just a regular shape. But you could like drag a box, but that box is gonna be like this straight line, right? And maybe you have some other stuff in between that you're trying to avoid clicking on, like some flowers or whatever here. There's a lot of ways to do everything, but I'd probably just group this and go into isolation mode if I was really trying to avoid those red stars. But you could use the lasso tool for this, I guess, just to like select just the parts that you want while avoiding the stuff that you don't want to select, right? And now you have all those tips of the grass selected without selecting the stars. I don't know, I can't come up with a better use for it. So that's the lasso tool. And here's a really important tool, probably the most used out of all the tools. The pen tool, at least used by me. I use it a lot. The pen tool. So the pen tool lets you draw Bezier curves. So we'll go over this in more detail at another time, but basically just clicking will draw a point. I know it looks weird right now because what's happening is the first point I clicked on and the last point I clicked on are pretty much connecting. They're the first and last point. So if this was a shape, this is how it would get filled because it doesn't go all the way around like this, right? So if you have a point here, they're going to connect. If I draw like this, see, it's always going to try to connect to the first point I clicked on. So that's why it looks weird like this. If I make it no fill, just a zigzag, it'll probably make more sense. Right. So it's useful because you can draw all of your shapes with it, and most of the time you're not going to be freehand drawing. I mean, you might be freehand, like trying to draw some shapes, but you might be tracing something most of the time. Right? You might throw on a picture of a dog or something. Say you're trying to make a dog logo, dog, and say a dog comes up somewhere. This one. You'll probably be using the pen tool to try to trace the dog shape to create your dog logo, right? There's also other tools that you might use to make your life easier, like image trace, uh, but sometimes it doesn't give you the results you're looking for, and also you end up with a lot more points than you need, and then you have to clean it up and get rid of all the extra points. Right? I vectorized this, but there's way too many points here. Right? This is going to increase the file size and make your computer slow. This is, by the way, if you did this on your phone, it probably I'm imagining it would really slow down your phone because this slows down the computer when you trace an image like this with a lot of detail. It really starts slowing down because you have all these like little points and curves and stuff. So it's like the equivalent of having a lot of pixels in a raster image. Okay. Anyways, um, so yeah, the pen tool would be used to draw your trace your graphics and then create a logo out of it somehow. I just imagine I traced it, took my time, um, eventually make like a silhouette of a dog and use it as a logo. The one next to the pen tool, I don't even know what it's called. It's called a curvature tool. So it's supposed to help you draw curves. I don't use it often, so I'm not used to how it works. It's kind of confusing. I don't know. I should probably learn how to use it because I feel like you could come up with some interesting shapes with this some abstract style. All right, so we'll skip that one and talk about the type tool. The T type tool. That one lets you draw text or type text. So there's a couple ways of using the type tool. One is you just click and start typing, and then you could type forever in a straight line. Right, this will just keep going in a straight line if I keep pressing buttons. Or if I press enter, return, jump to the next line. Press return, jump to the next line. So that's if you just click and start typing. The other option is instead of just clicking and typing, you click and draw a box and start typing. And if you do it this way, it'll try to fill up the box. If it doesn't fit in the box, you get this overflow. A lot like the way InDesign works. So if you've used InDesign, you know that you create text boxes and the text that doesn't fit overflows. You get that little red plus sign. You can click on it and continue your text in another box. So if I start typing in here and it fills up all the way, it continues in the other box. Right? This little thing shows me that this is connected to that. So whatever doesn't fit here will flow into the other box. So with the type tool, you can do that. You can either click and start typing or click and drag and start typing. By the way, it all automatically fills with placeholder text for you. This is called lorem ipsum placeholder text. If you delete that, you could right click and fill with placeholder text again if you need to. It's just a tool used by graphic designers. When you don't know what the text is going to be, you just need some placeholder text. That's a quick way of adding it. It's just gibberish Latin. Underneath the type tool, you'll find type area tool, type on a path, vertical type tool if you want to type vertically, vertical area type, vertical type on a path, touch type tool. That one I'm not familiar with, touch type tool. What is the touch type tool? No idea. There used to be a panel, maybe there still is, that would give you information on whatever tool you have selected. It's not the info. Hmm. I'll probably find it under help. Yeah, they add new tools all the time, new little things. So kind of have to try to keep up with it. But the main tools that you need remain unchanged. Pretty much, you can't really do much new in Illustrator that you could you could have done in Illustrator from like 15 years ago. Pretty much all the useful features are still there. So a lot of these you don't really need to click on to use them, like the area type tool and the type on a path. So you could imagine what the area type tool is for. That's if you're trying to draw within some shape like this, right? Uh, you could grab the type tool and just click on the path, and then it will convert to area type. So area type means now I could type inside. But you have to click at like a certain point in there. You have to go to like the side of it, and then you'll notice your cursor changes into a circle. The little icon next to it turns into like a dotted circle. It's hard to show you here, but when that happens, you know that it's gonna fill with text. So it's same as grabbing the area type tool and just clicking on it like that. I don't even know why you need the area type. It says you must click a non-compound, non-masking path to create. So it's just saying you have to click on a path to do it, but you could just click on a path with the regular type tool and it'll do the same. So not sure why they have a separate tool for it. I guess, oh no, even, okay, so if I hold shift and I do this, then it becomes vertical text on in a path. But yeah, that's just with the regular type tool it did that. Um, all right, what if you want to type along the path, not inside? Well, for that you have to hold the Option button or Alt, and that gives you Type on a Path tool. So type on the path. This one you could grab the Type on the path and then click on the path to type on it. You could use the Type on the path tool, or just with the regular type tool, hold the Alt button or Option button and do the same thing. So that's why I'm saying you don't actually have to click on these. You could just use the type tool. All right. Next to the type tool, we have our line segment tool. So it just looks like a line. That's used for drawing straight lines. So not nothing crazy there. But under that you'll find the arc tool for drawing an arc. This one's also kind of confusing to use. It's really not easy to figure out how you would use this exactly. It just draws arcs. You have the spiral tool. Okay, spiral if you want to create a spiral. You could manipulate your spiral a little bit if you hold the control button. You could change how tightly that spiral is wound up. So yeah, make that thinner. Zoom in a little bit. So see, I could get like a tighter coil or a looser coil by holding the control button or command on a Mac. Um, Holding the Alt button, the further out you go, you'll notice it goes deeper. Okay, I wouldn't really use the Alt button because that's confusing. Just don't even touch the Alt button when you're doing that. You're not gonna figure out what you're trying to do. Instead, you could, on your arrow keys, press up and down to control how deep you want the spiral to go. So up, you can see increases, down decreases it. I'm using my arrow keys. Also left and right does something to left, or what did right do? I pressed the right button and it like reset the spiral or something. I don't know what it did exactly, but combination of arrow keys while you're manipulating a shape does things. You have your rectangular grid tool for creating a grid. Up and down will add more rows and columns, left and right, I mean. Up and down will add rows or remove rows. Left and right will add or remove columns. But you got to do it while you're drawing the shape. And once you let go, up and down, left and right is just going to move it around if it's still selected. Alternatively, you could just click, and then the options will come up, and then you could choose how wide you want it and um, how many horizontal dividers and vertical dividers you want, and I'm not sure what the skew does. Oh, that just skews it. Um, yeah, that's one thing you can't really manipulate with the arrow keys. Now let's unskew it. 50, 50, I'm guessing was the default. No. What was the default on this? 0, 0. Yeah, so it's should be on 0, 0. I got way too many vertical dividers, 42. Let's bring that back down to 6. There we go. Anyways, that's the grid tool, rectangular grid tool. You have a polar grid also. This just does a polar grid. You could press up and down to change the number of pie slices and circles. Alright, so all those are under the line segment tool. You gotta right click to get to those, or click and hold your mouse button. Cool, and then we have the rectangle tool for drawing a rectangle. Pretty basic. You can draw a rectangle. If you hold shift, you draw a square. If you want to draw a specific shape, you click and then you can choose your width and height. Underneath that, you'll find a rounded rectangle. This was more useful in older versions of Illustrator, where you needed to draw a rounded rectangle because you didn't have this thing that you have now. So this didn't exist before, so it made more sense to have a rounded rectangle tool. Now, not so much, so you're probably never going to use the rounded rectangle tool. Ellipse tool for drawing ellipse, or shift to draw a circle. Again, click, choose the width and height if you need to. Polygon tool for drawing polygons. You can choose number of sides by pressing up and down, or by clicking and then typing in the radius and the number of sides. Same with the star tool. Up and down to add more points, or click to choose the radius. And well, it has two radiuses because it's a star. Technically there's two radiuses. There's this inner radius for the inner points of the star. There's also an outer radius for the outer points of the star. So when you're drawing a star, that's why you have radius 1 and radius 2, and then number of points. You can also hold the control button to increase one radius while keeping the other one the same, so you get like a sharper star. Holding command or control. Alt will reset it to like a straight star, and shift to hold it straight. So alt control. I was trying to figure out what control is used for. That's what control is used for. Okay, flare tool. I don't know how often this one is used, but it creates a flare. I don't know how often again, it's probably something you'll rarely touch. Flare tool. moving on to the next tool here, it's the paintbrush. So paintbrush for um so it's really similar to the pencil tool, or where is the pencil tool? We didn't even talk about the pencil. Did we? Where is the pencil tool? Oh, it's there. That's coming up next, I guess. The brush tool just lets you draw freehand like this, but the difference between the brush tool and the pencil tool, which is next, I mean, besides the fact that this is thinner, but that's not really important because you could always change the thickness of these. I think the main difference is with the brush tool when you draw a path, um, it uses a different, what do you call this? Different brush definition, and where this one uses one of these round ones by default, the pencil tool just uses a basic, um, yeah, just a basic brush. But also, with the paintbrush, you could choose a different brush. Say you want to draw with the arrow, you can do that with the paintbrush. But if you switch to the pencil tool and you try to draw an arrow, I mean, it'll change that. But if you draw a new line, it resets. It doesn't like to stay on arrow. So as soon as I draw a new one, it's basic again. So yeah, it's always basic when you're drawing with the pencil tool. But if you're trying to draw anything other than basic, then use the brush tool. But again, you could always draw and then convert it later. So it's really no difference, brush tool or pencil tool. Use either one. Um, Blob brush tool is different. That's the one under the brush tool. This is different. So the difference between the blob brush and the brush. Switch back to this regular one right here. So this is using the brush tool. This is using the blob brush tool. What's the difference? Difference is, if you look closely, this one's got, let me change the color so you can see better. Well, changing the color, you'll notice something different. This one I'm changing the stroke color. This one I'm changing the fill color. So the difference is, this draws a stroke, a single stroke, or a single path. This one draws a shape. So the blob brush draws a shape, where this one you have a single line in the center. This one drew a whole shape. Right. Okay, I'll skip the pencil tool and the shaper tool and the smooth tool. So they're just pencil tool related, and you don't use those often. Eraser tool is for erasing stuff. You won't be able to erase raster graphics though. Like this. This is copy pasted raster image. It's not a vector object, so you can't really manipulate that like you would regular objects in Illustrator. Again, you'd have to move this to Photoshop to mess with it, or convert it into a vector through image trace or something, but it doesn't always turn out great. So eraser lets you erase, but again, I wouldn't use this too often because it gives you unwanted, like, messy points. Right, if I erase this through here, you get a lot of extra points that you're not gonna want. So most of the time, if I'm trying to modify a shape, I'll just modify it directly with the direct selection tool and moving the point where I want. Rarely will you use the eraser like this. But you could also hold the shift button, or sorry, not the shift button, the alt button with the eraser will give you like a box eraser, which will erase in the shape of a box. Underneath the eraser, you have the scissor and the knife tool. So the knife tool, well, first one is the scissor tool. Scissor tool lets you delete, or not delete, but snip the points on a shape if you're trying to separate it. So that's a better example, maybe a star. So say we want to cut this star from like right here to here. Right, then you'd select this point with the scissors and just click on it, and then this one to click on it with the scissors. Now we've separated the star from there. The knife tool underneath the scissors tool, that one lets you knife through something. So it's like taking a straight blade through the shape, cutting it into those pieces. Not to be confused with the what do you call it? So there's a knife tool. This is the knife tool that we just went over. It's underneath the scissor tool. There's another tool that looks similar. It's called the slice tool, but that's something completely different. That's used for, it's really just for exporting the image. It's not really an image manipulation tool. It's not for really creating graphics. This is more, it has to do with exporting your image into separate pieces. So don't worry too much about the slice tool. You probably won't really use that ever, unless you're like exporting for, actually I don't think you'll ever use it. Another tool here is the rotate tool. Rotate tool is really cool. You'll use this a lot if you're trying to come up with cool creative graphics. So why is the rotate tool useful? Because you can do things like, let's say, let's draw like a triangle. I'm using the shape tool to make a triangle by pressing down arrow to lower the number of sides to 3, holding shift to keep it straight, and just letting go. Let's make that taller. So I'll take this and I'll take the rotate tool and I'll hold the rotate tool. Let's, I guess let's just put it here, for example. I'll click here and then start rotating it. So you could rotate just like this, but if you click one time, you could move the, you'll notice when you're using the rotate tool, there's a little anchor in the center, little blue crosshair over there. Kind of hard to see. It's easier to see now. There's a little blue thing there. That's your anchor. That's your pivot where you rotate around. You can move that when you're using the rotate tool. Move that to wherever you want, and then you'll rotate around the new point. It doesn't have to be in the shape. It could be wherever you want. Right, so if I want to rotate around this point, I'll click on that point, and I could rotate around that point. If I hold, if I do that and while I'm rotating, if I press the Alt button, I'll create a copy. But you're not really gonna do it that way. Here's how you most of the time use it. You hold the Alt button, and while you're holding the Alt button, you click, and that moves your anchor point, and at the same time opens up this rotate option window. And then here you could choose like a specific angle, because this way it makes more sense. You do a copy like that, and then you can do object uh, transform again, and then it'll repeat that. Or you could press the shortcut Control D and then go all the way around like that. And then using that, you could, draw some nice shapes. We'll practice that a little bit later. Um, so that was the rotate tool. Reflect tool reflects things. So say, let's grab a symbol. Say we have the shopping cart. You want to reflect it so it's facing the other way. You could use the reflect tool. And just like the rotate tool, you could choose like what point you want to reflect over. Right, I want to reflect over this line right here. And I could reflect it like that. You could also alt click and do it this way. Choose the actual angle and everything. Probably won't use the reflect tool as much as you'll use the rotate tool. Scale, shear, reshape tool. We'll skip those for now. Width tool, we'll talk about this real quick. The width tool lets you change the width of a stroke. So remember, you have strokes that you can choose different brushes on, and you can also choose different width profiles. So these are like preset what you'd be able to do with the width tool. Right, so you see how this side of the line is thicker than this side. Let's set this back to a uniform, the basic line. And with the width tool, you can actually manipulate the thickness however you like. Okay. And underneath that, there's a whole bunch of other tools. Let me bring that star. This kind of reminds me of what I was looking at earlier in Photoshop. I mentioned earlier that you can do things like, let's get a normal size canvas, not a tiny 26 by 30. Let's do regular size 1000 by 1000. Take that star, paste it in here. So in Photoshop, I said you could do things like smudge something, because this is a raster image editing software. Where's my brush? Oh, caps lock. There it is. So you could do stuff like this, right? Closest thing to doing that in Illustrator would be the twirl tool, I guess. But again, it's not messing with pixels, it's actually messing with the points. Okay. And then there's pucker. So yeah, these are just like for messing with the shape. warping it and stuff. Those are all under the width tool. Um, the free transform we'll skip. Puppet warp tool is actually wasn't here before. It's one of the recent additions, I think. Puppet warp it. There's a puppet warp in Photoshop. This works just like it, I guess. Pretty cool. All right, so shape builder and perspective. Still have like 10 minutes. I think I could cover most of these. So these are really important. The shape builder is really important because it lets you create shapes out of shapes. So you can take this and this, select both of them with the shape builder, hold the option button, or okay, more basic way. Don't hold the option button. Just click on the three pieces and you separate them. Um, if you want to, let's say, just delete that part, you hold the option button or alt button and click on it and it deletes it. If you drag across, you could unite them into one piece. This might be useful, like coming up with unique shapes. Maybe you take some circles and you rotate them. You select all of them and you see all these intersecting circles, and then you could use the shape builder to either connect some of these, like those center ones I just connected, get a shape from there, or I don't know, eliminate some of these, hold the alt button and delete, maybe just delete those, right? And just play around with it, see what you could come up with. Right, so that's why the shape builder is useful. Create shapes out of intersecting shapes. Live paint bucket tool is kind of similar. With the live paint bucket, if you have intersecting shapes, you can use the live paint bucket to fill them with different colors. Right, and difference is though they'll be grouped together at first. You'd have to break them apart or expand them. They're not exactly grouped actually. They're not. If you try to ungroup them, you'll see you can't ungroup them because they're not really grouped. They're joined together, which is kind of different. You could join objects. You could also group objects. Um, kind of does the same thing. It sticks them together, but since you can't ungroup them, how do you separate them? You break them apart or expand them, or um, you do a path and ooh, I forgot which one it was. In the Pathfinder, divide, expand. Okay, expand and then divide, and then ungroup. So it's yeah, it's weird. So you have to do a lot to get them separated. Um, what else? The perspective grid tool. Let's not worry about this yet. It's for drawing on a perspective grid. So if you're trying to draw in this particular perspective where you have these two vanishing points here and here, you could draw on in that perspective or switch to this perspective and draw on that perspective, or switch to this perspective and draw in this perspective. But it's kind of hard to get used to, so we'll talk about that when we go over that lesson. And perspective selection tool is just for selecting things in the perspective. So it has to do with the perspective grid. To get out of this, if you actually do this, you don't know how to get rid of this, press I think it's Control I, or no, Control Shift I. Get rid of that or bring it back. And you could also click on click this little X, but you have to do it with the perspective grid tool or the perspective selection tool. You can't do it with any other tool. It stays up there. So you have to select the perspective grid tool or perspective selection tool to click the little X to get rid of it. Uh, Mesh tool is for manipulating things in a mesh. Say, here's what it would be useful for. Say you have some text. Some text. And you, I don't know if you could do it directly with text. I think you can. So take the text, take a circle, put it on top of the text. Doesn't matter what color it is. I think it has to be on top of the text. Select those. And wait, I was going to talk about the mesh tool, but I'm switching to something similar. This is the envelope distort make with mesh. Sorry, make with top shape, I meant. Envelope distort, make with top object. So that lets you warp the object or text based on the shape that I had on top of it. Or I could use the mesh tool. I think with the mesh tool though, I have to use it on a actual object. It doesn't really work on text. Use it on this. So I don't know. It's running out of time, so I'm trying to come up with a good example. Uh, Maybe a star. A star. No. Bad idea. Okay, we'll come back to the mesh tool. You're supposed to be able to choose a grid. What did this do? This does not work the way it used to. Okay, skip the mesh tool because it doesn't work how it used to work. They changed it. Gradient tool for manipulating gradients. Say you fill this with a gradient using the gradient tool. You could click to fill it with the gradient, and with the gradient tool you can change the angle and the length of the gradient. Eyedropper for picking up colors. Similar to the magic wand tool, how you can change what it picks up, fill, color, stroke, weight, this, that. The eyedropper can also choose what you want to pick up, like the transparency. Do you want to pick up the fill color, the stroke color? So I could pick up this gradient and apply it to something else. Say this is red. If I select this, if I have this selected, I use the eyedropper to click on this, picks up the same fill. What else? We got eyedropper, blend tool. Blend tool lets you blend from one shape and color to another. Say we have a square. With the blend tool, I can click this to this one, and you see it creates a blend between them. You can also double click on the blend and choose the number of steps. Right. Then you have the symbol sprayer for spraying these symbols that I showed you earlier. You could spray them in different sizes. Well, they're all the same size now, but you could use the symbol sizer tool to kind of change their sizes. So that again is one of those things you rarely use, but might be useful in some situations. Spraying symbols, like I don't know, maybe you're making stars. Column graph. So there's a bunch of graph tools, and then you have the canvas tool, which lets you change the size of your canvas or create new canvases, different sizes. You could copy these with the Alt button. Um, Artboards. And then you have your hand tool for panning around your workspace. So just moving around the camera, and then the zoom tool for zooming the camera. And that's pretty much all the tools. And you have your fill and your stroke. You have your default fill and stroke, which switches to the default black and white. This one switches them. This one is for filling something with a solid color, which whatever color you have selected. This one fills it with a gradient, and this one gets rid of the fill. And you can also choose if you want to draw inside a shape or outside the shape, or draw normal. It's on normal. And then you have your screen mode. Press escape. You're not muted. I can hear you. But we're done. All right, 9:50. Let me give you the sign out. Gave you a little bit of info on every single tool in the tools panel, so you have a good idea now. But we'll look at them in more detail. But at least now you have a nice overall understanding of what you can do here.